You talked about the idea that parents should not place unnecessary expectations on children at home. Do you think that statement should have a caveat?
So what my goal would be is to have parents be informed on what is developmentally appropriate expectations. And it's like a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old doesn't necessarily need to be told, oh, you better learn this because you have to grow up and provide.
What's a dream you've let go of and why?
I think I've let go of my dream of being a professional hiker. And why is because I have 2 children and I own a business.
How did you come across Osiri University? All right, Lisa Gammel, thank you for joining me. I appreciate you a lot. How are you doing today?
I'm very well. How are you?
Well, it's a wonderful day to be alive. And I want you to know that this conversation is designed such that we get to learn from you and get to know you better as a community. And I want to lead by asking the first question, which is, when was a moment you felt completely out of place?
Oh, man. It's a good question. I think the only thing that's really coming to mind right now, because in general, I'm pretty comfortable everywhere, but when I studied abroad and I stepped off that plane in Italy and I realized, oh gosh, like I can't read the street signs. I can't just pick up a map and read it. I can't just go ask a stranger for directions. I was like, oh, I think I feel a little in over my head right now. I felt a little out of place, but it doesn't usually take me very long to assimilate and find my way in.
That's a good one. That's a good one. I have several questions in different categories, and I'd like for you to choose the category and the number of questions. Each category has 10 questions. So choose the category A through F and the number.
Let's do F7.
F7. F is legacy and impact. And so 7 is, what's a contribution you are proud of but rarely talk about?
Is it okay to say that the contribution that I'm proud of is still a work in progress, and that's why I don't talk about it very often?
Sure. It makes
Okay.
sense.
Yeah. So I I own and operate and participate in a parent and child Montessori school. And so I have the parents in class with the children, and I am coaching the parents on um, not only how to educate their children using the Montessori method and materials, but I'm also coaching parents on how to be less reactive to behavior through understanding their child's behavior and also recognizing their own triggers and then giving them time and space and community to talk through and work through their triggers so that the next time this behavior pops up, the parent isn't triggered and they can be responsive instead of reactive. And it's super meaningful work and it fills my cup every day. And I know that it's changing lives and it's contributing to the greater good. But I know that my work isn't done. So I don't know like the full extent of the contribution that I'm making just yet.
That is just brilliant. And
Thank you.
Lisa, I want to say that we appreciate you as a human being, but also as a professional. I know the students who are taking your course at Osiri University really enjoy the depth and breadth of knowledge that you bring to the classroom. And this is one a good example. This model where you have parents, co-teaching with you is just, again, brilliant. And I'm saying this because I have been looking at ways to find how we can innovate and sort of re-engineer the child care and early childhood space. And I would love to have some conversations with you, maybe outside of this um, conversation about that. I have also been thinking that perhaps okay. Let me back up a bit. The reason why I've been thinking about that a lot is because I know that early childhood is an area that needs a lot of attention. I mean, every parent wants their child to do well, but it can be very expensive. Childcare is very, very expensive, and the teachers, the caregivers aren't paid very well. So the parents don't have the money to pay, and so you don't have. So the schools or the childcare centers don't have the funds to pay the teachers very well. I think your model, and this is something I've been thinking about too, like how can we involve parents to sort of, lower the cost or lower the need to have a lot of staff who are doing the care, because now you can have well-trained staff who are coaching the parents who are then helping. I mean, what are your thoughts on that? Is this you're doing it, but I'm thinking about ways to actually scale this up.
Yeah. Scaling has been a problem, not necessarily a problem. Let me rephrase. Scaling has been a challenge. I agree with you on the need for childcare and the expense of running childcare and being able to pay your staff properly, and also having your tuition rates at something that's affordable for parents. Having the parents in the classroom definitely helps with the student to teacher ratio. So you don't necessarily need as many teachers, which helps. Um, as far as scalability goes, I think it's kind of a mindset shift that society needs to have. And we know that the foundation of all academic learning comes from having a stable social emotional foundation, as well as a well trained and balanced sensory system. And that is just something that the sensory system is something that parents are not educated on. It's kind of a new concept that's just hitting mainstream, but it's been around for hundreds of years. It's just becoming talked about now. But as far as like the social emotional foundation,
I'm sorry,
what
before you move on, I'm sorry, for the sake of the listeners, can you explain what you mean by sensory system?
yeah. So the pathways in the brain are created through the sensory system. And so if the sensory system isn't satisfied, and what I'm talking about is like not only the five senses that you know, but more importantly would be the proprioceptive system and the vestibular system, which are two of our sensory systems that don't get talked about very often. But the proprioceptive system is huge, and it comes from information that comes through the movement of your body. So it comes through pressure in your joints and through your muscles. And it actually is the largest sensory system in your body and accounts for about 80% of the sensory input that comes into the child or into the person. And so the sensory system is the foundation of the brain. And if the sensory needs are not met, then the child's brain doesn't focus on academics. It doesn't focus on quality sleep. It doesn't focus on digestion. And so those sensory needs are really important to be meeting, and they're met typically through movement, which we all know kids don't get enough movement these days. They're told, at 4 or 5 years old to sit in a desk all day and pay attention. And it's just not a developmentally appropriate expectation. They still need to be moving their bodies a lot in order to learn the academic things that the parents are hoping for children to learn. And the other side of that coin is that if a child doesn't feel safe and loved, they're not focused on learning academic stuff, they're focused on survival. And so you can get into that fight or flight survival mode if you don't feel safe or loved, or if your sensory system is on alert because it's not getting all the input that it's craving. And so those really important foundations need to be in place before we can expect any academic learning. And so what I was saying is that the mindset of society kind of needs to change, that our focus in early childhood needs to be on social, emotional, and sensory training and input, so that the brain and the child are able to then have academic input to their brain, right? But the parents don't know this, so they have developmentally inappropriate expectations that my child needs to know all their ABCs and all these things by 3 years
Mm,
old,
mm.
right? And also, the child needs to feel safe and loved. And so we need to have adults working with children who are able to regulate their own nervous systems, who are able to stay calm and patient, and who are able to be responsive to a child versus reactive. And also, when that child goes home, they need that safe and loved environment to continue, and they need to not have inappropriate expectations placed on them at home. So there really needs to be a good connection between home and school. It needs to be a continuous and consistent expectations and reactions or responses to behaviors or feelings. And all of that happens through nourishing the parent as well as caring for the child. And so what better way than to, pair them together and invite the parents into the classroom so that they are getting support and they're getting education, and they're also being given some time to work through those harder feelings that they are having, and then the child still gets to stay in a calm, safe, loving place with other adults who understand child development and then can help facilitate whatever the developmental need is in that moment.
Thank you very much. Would you please shed some light on the other two sensory system that is not often talked about? I think you call it the vestibular.
Yes, the proprioceptive system and the vestibular system. So some people will lump them together and say the vestibular system is inside of the proprioceptive system. I don't think there's any proof either way that it's separate or together. So the proprioceptive system is the system that tells you where is my body in space. And the information that this system craves comes from movement of your body, and the information comes in through the pressure in your joints and the contraction and release of muscles in your body. And we have tons and tons of muscles in our body, from the little tiny, like stabilizer muscles in your feet and in your spine, to obviously the larger muscle groups that we're all familiar with, like your abdominals, right? Um, so the proprioceptive system tells you, where am I in space? And this is the largest sensory system that we have in our body. Therefore, it sends the most information to the brain. And the brain craves this information. And the proprioceptive system shapes about 80% of the brain development in the first 6 years of a child's life. The other system is the vestibular system, which is what we tend to think about as like our inner ear. It's the part of our sensory system that gives us like balance and helps us coordinate those movements in space. And so I like to joke with parents. I'm like, I see a child who's spinning in circles at recess, and the parent is like, I don't know why they do that. And I say, well, they're exercising their vestibular system. They're working on getting dizzy and recovering. And so those are the two systems that I mentioned, in addition to your five senses that we already know.
If you don't mind me, I'm going to push a little bit the envelope here. Maybe we can go maybe we could go academic if you like. You talked about the idea that parents should not place unnecessary expectations on children at home. And I want to ask you this: do you think that statement should have a caveat? Because it might change depending on where you find yourself. It might change from one culture to another, from country to country. In other words, in certain countries, it might make sense to place that expectation on a child. If you look at, in the U.S., for example, where quote unquote most of our needs are met, right? In the U.S., if you're hungry, you could go out and go to a food pantry. You could get some food. People who are poor here are not really poor in other countries. So in those countries where you see more poverty, it might be more okay. I'm putting this to you, right? To place those expectations on children. I'm not saying within reason, right? Within reason. And maybe you now tell them, hey, you got to start learning this thing so that you could grow up and help contribute to the family. What do you have to say about that approach to thinking?
Yeah. So what my goal would be is to have parents be informed on what is developmentally appropriate expectations. And it's like a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old doesn't necessarily need to be told, oh, you better learn this because you have to grow up and provide. Right. But 2-year-olds and 3-year-olds naturally want to contribute to their family. And so we can help them learn how to contribute without verbalizing the pressure of you need to do this so that this happens in the future. Because those 2-year-olds and 3-year-olds don't understand the future anyway. They don't have a concept of time yet. And so I think that's more of what I was talking about of, you know, if I can do another example in the US, right? We have a kid who, let's say they're very well off, they want for nothing, and the parents are sending them to preschool so that they can learn reading, writing, and arithmetic at 3 and 4 years old. Well,
Mm-hmm.
developmentally, that child is not even ready to hold a pencil yet. Developmentally, they need to be moving their body more and they need to be building their social and emotional skills so that when their brain is ready for academics, the brain is ready to receive that information because it's not too focused on still
Mm-hmm.
seeking out connection, safety, and movement. Does that make sense? So what I'm hoping is that we can educate all parents on development so that they can meet their kid developmentally at each stage in life to prepare them through their family's value lens for their future. Did
Well
that
said.
answer
Thank you
your
very much.
question?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it did. All right, let's go to another category. A through F, 1 to 10.
Um, let's go with C2.
All right. So C is passion and purpose.
Oh boy.
And C2 says, what's a dream you've let go of and why?
I think I've let go of my dream of being a professional hiker. And why is because I have 2 children and I own a business and I'm 40 years old now and hiking is harder than it used to be.
All right. Thank you for that. That was short and sweet. So actually, the previous guest left a question for you, and I'm going to ask that question now, and that is, how did you come across Osiri University?
I came across Osiri University through Kathy Sweet. She was one of my professors when I was studying at UNK. And she and I became quick friends. And when UNK dropped the program that we were both so passionate about, she was on a mission to find another school to move the program to. And even while I was still in training, she had mentioned having me come and work alongside her as a colleague. And it's something I've always wanted to do. And so we just kept in good touch, and our friendship has grown. And she said, hey, I found a university who wants to pick up the Montessori teacher education program. Would you like to come along? And I said, yes, please. I would love to be there. Thank you for asking.
Thank you, Lisa Gammel.
Yes,
Ubuntu.
thank you. Thank you. Ubuntu.